We've already kind of walked through the story of an hour once before, but I did want to walk through the text notes that I made for this story. First, before we talk about the story itself, let's talk about why the narrator is so important to this story. You're going to need to understand that in order to be able to formulate your first essay. So, the narrator in general plays such an important role in how a story develops. He or she shapes our perspective, the reader's perspective as an audience, especially in regards to how the main character develops, or main characters. Omniscient narration is like an all-knowing voice. If you'll remember from our lecture on narration, that gives inside information, helps to clarify character motives, the feelings and actions. And it's through this outside perspective that we gain an overall picture. It's a full access, an unbiased access. The words and thoughts and actions and feelings, we get that, and not just what the character says and does. So in this story, that number one, we know something that Miss Mallard doesn't in the beginning. We know that she's afflicted with a heart condition. And the story ends after she's already dead. And so we get a full picture of the story. If it had been told from Miss Mallard's perspective, obviously the ending of the story would not have made as much sense as it does to us through the eyes of a third-person narration. In this story, viewing it from an outside perspective helps keep Miss Mallard, or keeps us really more sympathetic to Miss Mallard, and we understand her better. From her point of view, we would have viewed her as callous and shallow, and here she is, she's happy that her husband is dead, but through that third-person narrator, we see how she fights that freedom, that feeling of freedom. And how she tries to resist against the feelings that are trying to come to her. It's not her fault that she's having those feelings. We see that she's unable to resist them. She's trying to beat them away with her hands. She's on the verge of thinking something startling there in the middle of the story when she's sitting in the chair. She's kind of glad that her husband's dead because she gets to be free, and straight from Miss Mallard, we would have thought her selfish. We might have thought she didn't love her husband, but we do know that she did love her husband in her own way, but that he had just suppressed all of those things that were her. She wasn't able to live for herself. I mean, just the idea that her name wasn't mentioned until the 17th paragraph of the story, that identity is tied to her marriage. I wanted to look back at that concept, and I found a couple of textual instances that I wanted to just share. So we know that Miss Mallard, her identity is tied to her husband. We just said that she's not recognized as Louise until paragraph 17. It's clearly an oppressive relationship. The text tells us specifically that it's not a physically or verbally abusive relationship. It says very specifically that her husband had never looked save with love upon her. However, it has resulted in the loss of her identity. Several textual evidences point to that. There was a powerful will bending hers. She would live for herself. It just intimates that she hasn't been up until that point. She is also clearly constricted by the strict roles that society imposes on women at the time. So women are obviously expected to be subservient to their husbands. We know this very clearly because she's horrified by her thoughts and struggles that she feels at being free. She's physically trying to beat it away and worried what people are going to think about it. Again, with the narrator, one last thing that I wanted to point out, in addition to keeping us more sympathetic and empathizing more with her situation, we do get that full, well-rounded version of the events that we would not ever see from her point of view. We know that she has a heart condition. We know how she dies and the reason behind that we have the account of her death. That ironic twist at the end. And we get those details of her physical appearance when she carries herself like a goddess of victory, straight and down the stairs. We get all of that through that use of the third person narrator.